Okay, great. Thank you. So today's shiur is dedicated by Hinda Levi in honor of the third birthday of her granddaughter, Nechama Rochel Bas Sarah Tava. Be'ezus Hashem, she should give you much Yiddish nachas. So, do you know that it's our first year anniversary, our 1 year anniversary? Although I had given shiurim live in Perth prior to that, our first Zoom shiur was for Shavuos last year. So in celebration of our anniversary, we're going to have a little quiz. I know you'd much rather prefer chocolate and diamonds, and probably in that order too. But don't worry, one of the benefits of Zoom is that you're all on mute, so there's no pressure. But those of you in a group at home at a day with a day, feel free to discuss among yourselves. So Baruch Hashem, in the time we've spent together over the past year, we've had, and longer before when it was live, we've had the opportunity to discuss different ideas in different parshas of the Torah. And so this is the question for the quiz. What do you think is the single most important pasuk, the single most important verse in the Torah? Now, of course, with the caveat that in some way all the verses in the Torah have equal importance because they're all part of the Torah. And we know that if even one letter is missing in the Torah, the entire Torah is pasul, it cannot be used. But still, it seems that there are certain pesukim that contain central ideas which inform all of Torah living. So as we approach Shavuot, okay, the day of Matan Torah, of receiving the Torah, and we recommit ourselves, it's a day when we recommit ourselves to Torah, what would you say is the verse that seems to express this more than any other verse in the Torah? To make it easier, I'm going to make it a multiple choice quiz. And by the way, the notion that they say that C is usually the most often correct answer in multiple choice is actually a myth. So now you're all going to be wondering whether it really is C, and I just put that in as a red herring. But you ready? Here are the options. Option A, love your neighbor as you love yourself. It's a verse from Vayikra. And Rabbi Akiva tells us, V'ahavta l'recha kamocha ze klal gadol b'Torah. Love your neighbor as yourself. This is a fundamental principle in the Torah. No doubt about it, because Uncle Moshe sings a song about it. Loving your fellow means putting yourself in the other person's shoes. It means being attuned and sensitive to their needs. And even Uncle Moshe tells us, just walk beside me and be my friend, and together we'll walk in the ways of Hashem. It's about emulating Hashem's ways. Just like Hashem visits the sick, so too do we visit the sick. Just as Hashem comforts the mourners, so too do we comfort the mourners. Hashem clothes Adam and Chava, so too do we give tzedakah. This is all part of emulating Hashem and all part of loving one's neighbor as oneself. And if you remember the story of Hillel and Shammai and the prospective convert, a prospective convert goes to Shammai and says, I want to convert. He said, but only on the condition that you teach me the whole Torah while I stand on one leg. And Shammai sends him away. But he goes to Hillel and he asks the same question. And Hillel says, that which is hateful to you, do not do to your neighbor. The rest is commentary. Now go and learn. Now, that which is hateful to you, do not do to your neighbor is a corollary of love your neighbor as yourself. And incidentally, if you want to know how to get to this point of loving one's fellow as oneself, because it's hard, that's an emotion, start with an action, or at least desisting from an action. Do not do to your fellow what is hateful to you. So that is option A, which is a pretty good option, I'd say, given that it's endorsed by no less than Rabbi Akiva, Hillel HaZaken, and Uncle Moshe. But before you're quick to choose that, let's look at option B. Option B is from Bereshis, one of the first chapters in the Torah, and it says, this is the book of the Chronicles of Man. On the day that God created man, he created man in the image of God. Perhaps this is the meta principle of the Torah, that man is created in the image of God. This means, what does this mean? It means that every single person has innate human worth and dignity. If man was created in the image of God, it means that nobody should be dehumanized, discriminated against, murdered. Indeed, we find that parts of the Torah and Tanakh are quoted in the works of those people who envisaged modern-day democracy. There's a clear linkage between this verse, man was created in the image of God, and the American Declaration of Independence, all men are created equal, as well as the Declaration of the Rights of Man and the Citizen that was endorsed by the French National Assembly after the French Revolution. What would the world be like without this principle? I know it's getting hard. And just to make it a little bit harder, have you forgotten about another verse? Option C, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Surely this is the central verse of the Torah, and it's option C. These words highlight our daily prayers, and they express a powerful pearls of faith. These words have been whispered throughout the ages, at times of brave challenge, in a dark hidden cellar, by people breathing their last breaths. They've been cried out at an auto da fe in Spain, at a gas chamber in Nazi Germany. They are at the core of our being. A few stories from October 7th. One man went to save his wife, who was a security guard at the supernova party. He says, I grabbed my guns and ammunition and jumped into the car. I shouted Shema Yisrael as I raced past terrorists, bullets flying all over, he recalled. Another survivor describes his escape in the car. I pushed my wife's head down, said Shema Yisrael, and roared out of there with one hand on the wheel. Bullets whizzed by from every direction. 4 friends spent hours and hours running and hiding, dodging bullets, grenades, even axes, running, hiding, until they were rescued. One of them said, the only weapon I had was Shema Yisrael. Benny Hassan lived in Kibbutz Kosovim. He and his wife spent hours and hours and hours hiding in their safe room. Eventually, soldiers came to rescue them at 4 a.m. in the morning, but they didn't know, were these soldiers or were they terrorists? So Benny says, finish the sentence, Shema Yisrael. And the soldier answers, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. And they felt safe to open the door. These are also words of hope and happiness. They sang in great joy, at significant milestones, before a baby's birth, at times of great achdus. Shema Yisrael, we declare that there is only Hashem. He is responsible for everything, for all our existence, and it also highlights our relationship with Hashem. That is option C. And now, let's look at the fourth and final contender for the central verse in the Torah, option D. This is a verse that appears twice in the Torah, once in Shmos and once in Sefer Bamidbar. So now with our previous three choices, we've got all 5 books of the Torah covered. And this says, the one lamb you shall offer in the morning and the second lamb you shall offer in the afternoon. And it's talking about korbanos, sacrifices. If you remember, the korbanos, the sacrifices, were a central part of the avodah of the service in the Beis HaMikdash, in the temple. And this particular korban that they're talking about is the korban tamid, the daily sacrifice. Tamid means constant. And this was a sacrifice that was brought when the Beis HaMikdash was standing every single morning and afternoon, every day, even on Shabbos and even on Yom Kippur. And if you look at the beginning of a siddur, you might notice some verses that say korbanos on them, and even something saying korban tamud that we say instead of the korbanos every day. Generally, women do not say them. There are some opinions that say a woman should say korban tamid, and some opinions say all of them. But that's option D. Full disclosure, I did not make this quiz up. And we've been learning for a while now, so the giveaway should have been that you should know me by now. I believe that chocolate is the answer to everything. And as chocolate wasn't one of the options, it was a bit of a clue that I've copied this from somewhere. So where did I copy it from? A fascinating midrash gives 4 opinions as to which is the most important verse in the Torah, and this is how it goes. The first rabbi says, love your neighbor as yourself. That is the most important verse in the Torah. And then another rabbi says, no. He says, all people are created in the image of God. Option B. Okay, I hope you're deciding, thinking to yourself which one it is. Then Ben Zoma comes and says, no, I find a more inclusive verse, and that's Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Option C. And then finally, Shimon ben Pazi comes and he says, no, I find a more inclusive verse, and that is the one lamb you shall offer in the morning and the second lamb in the afternoon. Option D. Have you all decided? Rabbi Ploni stood up and he said, the halacha is in accordance with Shimon ben Pazi. Option D, one lamb you shall offer in the morning and the second lamb in the afternoon. A bit of an anticlimax, wouldn't you say? What's going on here? The first three opinions make perfect sense as they highlight some of the fundamental principles and teachings of the Torah. If we're all created in the image of God, then we all have intrinsic worth, human dignity. We respect this godliness in every person by loving our neighbor as ourselves. Shema Yisrael, we live by it, we die by it. It's central to our prayers every single day. It proclaims our belief in Hashem's kingship, his sovereignty over us, and it's our acceptance of his mitzvahs. But this, one lamb you shall offer in the morning and the second lamb in the afternoon. If you had to randomly stop people in the street and ask them if they've ever heard of this verse, I doubt you get very many answers in the affirmative. So this seems very perplexing. The Maharal explains. He says that the verse emphasizes that we should serve Hashem with consistency on a perpetual basis. Shimon ben Pazi believes that the only way to transform our lives in a sustainable way is through continual daily commitment. Believing in love your neighbor as yourself, that all people are created in the image of God, and Shema Yisrael is of course important. We're not negating that. However, it is only through a continuous and consistent commitment, day in, day out, that change is possible. It's the commitment and perpetual dedication that is the heart of a moral and spiritual life. After all, repeated daily actions become habits. Habits, in turn, become ingrained character traits, and character traits eventually transform a person. The reason Shimon ben Pazi crowns this verse as the most cardinal one in the Torah is because he understood that deeds are what attest to a person's character. The key to success and growth in any endeavor is daily regularity. All too often we'll try to change, we'll try to get a breakthrough, success in our life in one huge swoop, and one just trying to do one large stride. And that's generally not the most effective way. The best way to become your highest self is to simply put in the work, day in, day out. Or as Stephen Covey in his work, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People says, it is precisely our habits, the things that we regularly do, that define us. But the Torah told us that long before then. We commanded to eat the Korban Pesach, the Paschal sacrifice, and we're told that we may not break the bones when we eat it. And the Sefer HaChinuch expounds on this, and he says it's not fitting for kings and royalty and their advisors to break the bones and to eat like dogs. Meaning, that's the way people are hungry, people are poor, people are starving. That's the way people eat, to try and scrounge and to get every single last little morsel off the bones. And he says, no. He says, that's not how esteemed people work. And on Pesach night, we're meant to be like royalty. And he says, psychologically speaking, a person's attitude is shaped by their actions. So the Torah gives us many mitzvahs to commemorate the Exodus on Seder night, and for us to behave like royalty in order to reinforce these ideas so that we will internalize them. Or as the quote goes, we are what we repeatedly do. The non-spectacular nature of this verse is exactly what renders it significant. It doesn't describe any miraculous historical events or any moments of this spiritual awakening, but by continuing to bring the same offering day in, day out, the Jew expresses his commitment with conviction. Shimon ben Pazi suggests that dedication and consistency are the most fundamental elements of a Torah life. Yes, we have the chagim and the boost that they give us, and yes, we have our moments of inspiration, but by and large, our lives comprise of our mundane, our ordinary lives, daily living. It's for this reason that our sages emphasize that Judaism is about everyday living. Momentous historical events and yes, our moments of inspiration, they are important, but they alone cannot transform. It's only through daily commitment to these events and awakenings that we can change. And this is Shimon ben Pazi's secret, committing to the ordinary and everyday lives, but within them, the extraordinary. That's what ultimately transforms. We're in this world to have a relationship with Hashem, dveikus, to cleave to Hashem. Hashem desires, longs, craves to have a relationship with us. Now, we've discussed in a previous shiur that the place, the Mishkan, that tabernacle, that portable sanctuary in the desert, that was where the place that we could feel the Shekhinah, that our hearts were opened up to Hashem more than any other. Now, it's very interesting. The word tamid, which we said means constant, appears at least 9 out of 10 times, and it appears in the Torah with reference to the Mishkan. We have the bread on the shulchan that was there on the table, that was there tamid. We have the ner tamid, the light. We have the esh tamid on the altar, and so on. What is the message of this? That life is mentioned by constants, not by once a year or once in a lifetime events. Mitzvahs are a means to an end. The end being dveikus, this cleaving, this relationship with Hashem. How do they do that? One of the ways is that mitzvahs concretize our values into the nitty-gritty of everyday living. You want to be a good person? The Torah says, great. Give tzedakah, return lost objects, don't be jealous. This is how we connect to Hashem. And you want to feel more connected to Hashem? Then yes, daven or speak to Hashem. Can be on your own words, but every single day. Inspiration may happen at various times, but translating that inspiration into consistent action, that is the challenge, but also the opportunity that we face. What is a korban? We translated a korban as sacrifice, but really it comes from the word lahakriv, to draw close. The korban tamid is a constant drawing closer to Hashem. We bring these daily korbanos through our actions for Hashem. During exciting days and during monotonous days, on bleak days and on bright days, on good hair days and on bad hair days. 1 lamb shall you offer in the morning, and a 2nd lamb in the afternoon. In the morning when we wake up, we're called to bring an offering, to bring something of ourselves, to come close to Hashem. And in the afternoon when we're winding down, we're called once again to bring something to ourselves, to Hashem. This is how we cement the relationship with Hashem. So how do we achieve this closeness to Hashem? Like any relationship, a relationship needs consistency. If you only want to take out the garbage or make a meal when you feel like it, if you only want to be there for the good times and not the challenging times, then that's not a relationship. A relationship involves the daily grind, not only the bells and whistles of an anniversary dinner. And for sure, a relationship needs a slab of chocolate every day and not only on a birthday. That's how we achieve dveikus, this cleaving to Hashem. And that's what we need to know. Now, we're all at different stages in our relationship with Hashem, but this is something that's applicable to all of us. Take one small thing and do it with consistency. Offer it to Hashem. I saw a lovely video clip a while ago. Just a bit of background for me to explain what Daf Yomi is, if you don't know what it is. But Daf Yomi is a routine whereby men learn a page, both sides of a page of a Talmud every single day. And at this pace, every 7.5 years, they'll have completed the whole of Shas, the whole of the Talmud. And it's a beautiful concept because that means that everybody around the whole world is learning the same page every day. And at the end of it, at the end of 7.5 years, there's huge celebrations, siyumim all around the world. There was one at MetLife Stadium in America that over 90,000 people came at the last Siyum Hashas. And that was just one of the siyum. And many shuls, just notice that many shuls will have a Daf Yomi shiur each day, which explains the ideas that they're learning in the Daf that day. It's hard work and tremendous commitment. And so to help with this, the OU in America has created an app, a Daf Yomi app. Now, the clip I saw was that they were interviewing a little boy, Charlie. So the OU had found out that there was this 12-year-old boy, Charlie, who had decided to start learning Daf Yomi and was using the OU's app for help. Now, for a 12-year-old boy to decide this is amazing in and of itself and a huge commitment. But not only that, during the COVID pandemic, he decided to start giving a Daf Yomi SHIUR to his friends, and he was using the OU app for help. And so the OU went and interviewed him and his parents and his teachers. And one of his teachers gave Charlie some advice. And he said to Charlie that he must focus less on the Daf and more on the Yomi. Meaning that he's going to get to parts of the Gemara where he's going to say, this Aramaic is all Greek to me. But his teacher said, don't skip it. Even if it means giving the shiur and saying, I don't understand. I don't know what this means. He says, but show up. Show up each day. The Lubavitcher Rebbe used to sit down and have a cup of tea with his wife every day. Dr. Ira Weiss was one of the Rebbe's personal physicians for 20 years. And he said that once the Rebbe said to him that the time that he devotes to sitting down with his wife every day for a cup of tea is as important to him as the mitzvah of putting on tefillin. Now, I doubt that the Rebbe and his wife had these earth-shattering conversations. So what if he missed a day of tea with his wife? Have 2 cups of tea the next day? How can he compare that to the mitzvah of tefillin? Because he understood that it's consistency that builds and cements a relationship. Stephen Guise, in his book, Mini Habits, explains that it's small habits that lead to results. It's the consistency that's important. And he explains that he'd been trying to get motivated to exercise for years and years and years, but he just couldn't get motivated. So he decides to commit to 1 push-up a day. And I'll read to you what he says. 1 push-up, I may have been down, but I could do better than that. Eventually, I decided to do it out of self-mockery and frustration for failing to get motivated. If I can't do a simple 30-minute workout, then I'm going to do 1 push-up. Great job, Stephen. You can do a push-up. Your dreams will surely come true now. As I lowered myself to the ground, my joints creaked, my arms were weak, and my body screamed at me to sit on the couch. But all I had to do was 1 push-up. So I did, and it transformed my life. Take one thing, whether it's trying to make a bracha with kavan or trying to make a bracha at all, and offer it, whatever it is, and offer it to Hashem daily. Or maybe you want to smile at a co-worker and think to yourself, I'm emulating Hashem, and offer it to Hashem daily. It does not need to be big, but it will be life-transforming because it's less about the daf and more about the yomi. Hashem just wants to sit down and have a simple cup of tea with you every day. Consistency is beautiful, but consistency does have one major pitfall. And this pitfall is hinted to by an incongruous pasuk verse in the middle of the chapter of the verse of the Korban Tamid, this daily sacrifice that we've been discussing until now. And in Parshas Pinchas, it discusses all these different sacrifices, and it speaks about the Korban Tamid, as we said had to be brought when the Beis HaMikdash was standing. But as Hashem, we should be able to bring it soon again. But when it was standing, we brought it every morning, every afternoon, every single day, even on Shabbos, even on Yom Kippur. Then, for no apparent reason, the Torah inserts this pasuk into the middle of the description of the Korban Tamid, and it says the continual burnt offering, which was made at Mount Sinai for a pleasant aroma, a fire offering before Hashem. Now, what is this olah, this offering, which they're talking about at the revelation of Har Sinai, of receiving the Torah, have to do with a section about the daily Tamid, about the daily sacrifice? What happened at Har Sinai? What happened at Mount Sinai? That's history. It happened once, never again. Why is it mentioned in the middle of the description of the Korban Tamid that happened every single day? So the biblical commentators are all troubled by this, and why is it here? What's it teaching us? And they give various halachic opinions as to the reason. It's a classic case of 2 Jews, 3 opinions. But one thing they all do agree on, believe it or not, is that it's incongruous that this verse has been inserted here. Rav Yosef Salant said that although the rabbis of the Talmud are arguing about halachic principles here, there's a very important hashkafic idea that we can learn from this. And that is the pitfall of consistency. While the daily offering is indicative of this value of consistent routine, the inherent danger of consistency is that we become so used to a task that it becomes mundane and complacency sets in. When something is done day in and day out, as wonderful as it may be, it becomes rote. It becomes stale. It becomes automatic. It becomes without thought. In contrast, Mount Sinai and the events of receiving the Torah and Shavuos represent the height of inspiration and excitement and spirituality. So Mount Sinai, this epitome of passion, is juxtaposed with the Korban Tamid, which is the epitome of routine. It is precisely this juxtaposition of seemingly contradictory religious experiences that highlights the balance that we are expected to strike. While in order to integrate Torah and Judaism into our lives, we have to be persistent in our pursuit of consistency at routine. At the same time, in order to stave off the real risks of complacency, we have to seek the moments of passion and inspiration. I remember going to a friend for Shabbos who had recently got married, and she was ready to light Shabbos candles about 15 minutes, maybe half an hour in advance. And she was all there, beautifully made up in her sheitel and her beautiful outfit, probably something left over from Sheva Brachos. And she lit candles, and she lit them slowly, and she made the brachos slowly and meditatively. And she spent a long, long, long time davening afterwards in front of the candles. Fast forward 15 years, and I was at her for Shabbos again, and she flew downstairs just before the end of the 18 minutes in a Shabbos robe, in a tickle, lit in a few seconds, and flopped down on the couch with the Mishpacha magazine. Now, okay, so you can say having 6 kids had something to do with it. Shortly after that, there was an opportunity to make Birchas Hachama. So what is this? This is a blessing that we say when the sun returns to the same position at the same time of the week that it was at the time of creation. And so we make a special blessing because this only happens once every 28 years that you can make this blessing. The last time it happened was in April 2009. I was living in London at the time, and there was a huge event with a whole lot of rabbis speaking before at 4 o'clock in the morning. So they'd speak at 4, and then people would all be there together so that they'd have the opportunity to make the bracha as they saw the sun rise, which is the most opportune time, although you can make it, at least some rabbis say, at least 3 hours after that. Other people say until halachic noon. However, according to most opinions, if the sun is covered by the clouds, you cannot make this bracha. So as I said, I was living in London at the time, and so I did not go. This was London. I had no confidence whatsoever that you'd actually be able to see the sun. I mean, I'd been living there quite a number of years at the time, and I could probably count on one hand the number of times that it had been sunny. But she went, and it was a packed event. So on the one hand, you can say, understandably so, because you only get the opportunity to make this bracha once every 28 years. But should there be any difference between the excitement one feels about making that bracha or making a bracha over Shabbos candles or any bracha we say daily? All of them are opportunities to connect with Hashem. Watch a bar mitzvah boy putting on tefillin and making sure that every strap is in order and in the right place and tight, and how excited he is about doing it, putting them on. Watch his father putting on tefillin. In 30 seconds, you sneeze and you've missed it. Now, on the one hand, yes, his father's been putting on tefillin for maybe 30 years and can put it on correctly in 30 seconds. And on the one hand, his father can look up back and say, he's never missed a day in 30 days, 30 years, sorry, 30 years. Now, that's great. That's tamid. But that tamid can become old hat. Okay, and when that becomes old hat, it sometimes lacks the true mitzvah, the true feeling of that tamid. And that is the pitfall of tamid. Therefore, the Torah inserts this continual burnt offering that was offered at Mount Sinai, this pleasing aroma to Hashem, in the middle of the pashas of Korban Tamid that applies for all generations. Remember that Tamid. Remember that the first Tamid, the continual burnt offering, the continuous that Tamid. Remember that was brought to Har Sinai. Remember that excitement that you felt, that newness, that energy, that excitement. Remember that. There must always be a little bit of that tamid, that continuous offering in the tamid, in the constant offering that is brought every day. King David expresses this idea in Tehillim, in Perek 27. It's the Perek that we say every day at the beginning in Shacharis from Elul until Shmini Atzeres. And in it he says, Achat sha'alsi, one thing I ask of Hashem, that I may dwell in the house of Hashem. And then he says, and to visit your sanctuary. Now, this seems a bit strange. House of Hashem and sanctuary, they are synonymous. But on the one hand, he says he wants to dwell in it. And then he says he wants to visit. So what is it? Does he want to dwell? Or does he want to visit? King David's request is that he wants to have it both ways. Yes, he wants to be the one who dwells every day in the house of Hashem. He wants to be there constantly. He wants to be there all the time. But he also wants to feel like he's only a visitor. He wants it to feel special and new. He wants to protect his daily routine from the risk of complacency by infusing it with enthusiasm. So the Torah is encouraging us to seek a life of consistent dedication and routine, balanced with a sense of excitement and inspiration. And so this is a difficult request because these two qualities are almost mutually exclusive. When one has consistency, it does seem to become rote and you don't feel that freshness, and vice versa. But this is the goal, and this is the lesson of the Korban Tamid. It needs to be the one every morning and the second one in the afternoon, but it also needs to be like the one that was offered on Har Sinai. Admittedly, it's hard to balance these two, but it's not impossible. And we have a role model in Aaron. Aaron receives the commandment to light the menorah every day. And in Parshas Behalaska, it says, Aaron did so, he lit the lamps just as God commanded. Rashi wonders why this verse is necessary. I mean, the working assumption is that Aaron, who's this model spiritual persona, would do exactly as Hashem commanded. And Rashi comments and he says, it's necessary to indicate Aaron's virtue that he does not change. Rashi's comments are troubling, to say the least. Firstly, why on earth does the Torah need to praise Aaron for not altering Hashem's command? As we said, it's a basic ritual. Secondly, is this the greatest praise you can give Aaron? This is Aaron, who, when his younger brother Moshe comes back to lead the people, Aaron doesn't have this single tinge of jealousy for his younger brother. This is Aaron, who was the beloved pursuer of peace, who was beloved by the entire nation. This was Aaron, who was prepared to sacrifice his spiritual destiny for the Jewish people. It would almost seem that for all this extraordinary work Aaron accomplished in his lifetime, the ultimate praise is from something quite ordinary. Perhaps that is precisely the point. Shimon ben Pazi's verse emerges triumphant. Routine, however, is not to be confused with rote. Inspired consistency is the name of the game. And perhaps this was the greatest achievement of Aaron, the model spiritual personality. He summoned the same inspiration in year 30 as he did in year 1. In the Shema we say, V'hayu hadvarim ha'eleh, and all these things which I command you today should be upon your heart. Our sages, our rabbis explain what today is, that the day being spoken about is every day. Every day we should feel like we're receiving the Torah anew. just as we received it on Har Sinai that we'll be celebrating on Shavuot. The message is clear. Every day we have to recommit and re-receive the Torah and recommit to an idea, to a life of Torah living. Still, we're not Aaron, and this is hard. So I'd like to suggest an idea that can help us with this. In Parshas Naso, the Torah describes at length the sacrifices that the different Nasim, the leaders of the tribes, that they brought at the inauguration of the Mishkan, the tabernacle. And each Nasi, each leader brought the same offering. So the Torah describes the first offering that the first Nasi brought, and then describes all the others of the other tribes in virtually identical detail. Now, broken record alert, because we've discussed this many times in our SHIURim together, that the Torah does not have a single unnecessary letter, never mind word. So why doesn't the Torah just describe what the first Nasi brought and then say ditto? All the others brought the same offering. The Torah is telling us that each Nasi who brought a sacrifice, even though it was identical to the previous Nasis, in Hashem's eyes, it was as if it was the first time he was receiving it. The sacrifice of every single Nasi was special to him. Sometimes we may feel that we're constantly doing the same thing, same old, whether it's the words of that we daven, or whether it's the mitzvahs that we do. It's the same old, and we lack that enthusiasm. However, we must realize that even if we lose our enthusiasm, is that if we think same old, Hashem does not. Every time we do a mitzvah or we daven or whatever it is, Hashem cherishes it and takes pleasure in it as if it was the first one that was offered at Har Sinai. And that's what we have to know. And that's what it is from Hashem's perspective, the very first time. And if you take a moment to think about this before you light Shabbos candles or make a bracha, whatever it is, it can change your attitude. Just think for a moment. Remember the first time that you tasted a magnificent piece of fine Swiss chocolate, and the taste and the texture, and how it was the tantalizing it was to the taste buds, and how excited you were that a chocolate like this exists, and how you wanted to have more of it. Or the first time you met someone, friend, partner, whoever it was that you just clicked with, and it was so interesting, you just wanted to get to know them and hear what they have to say, and you were interested in the conversation and enjoying it. Every single time we daven, we make a bracha, we do a mitzvah, to Hashem enjoys it as if it's the first time he's eaten chocolate. He listens to us as if, and gives us the same attention as if it's the first time we ever spoke to him. Now that's wow. And if you can keep in mind that Hashem is eagerly waiting to hear from you, then he's anticipating your words, your actions. Then it's easier to have that inspiration. The deep meaning of the Midrash is now revealed. Of course, we must believe in the Shema, and of course, loving your neighbor is important. But the lamb in the morning and the lamb in the afternoon, the obligation of the daily offering, a routine never to be departed from, serves as a paradigm for the commitment to a daily cup of tea with Hashem. Let me close by sharing a story related by Dr. Yaakov Brauer that encapsulates everything that we've been speaking about until now. He writes it so beautifully that I'm going to read it to you so that you can hear it in his words. The mincha, or afternoon prayer, is the shortest of the 3 daily services. Moreover, the time for this prayer often arrives while we are still immersed in our work. People are tired and busy, and it is difficult to divest oneself of the effects of a day at the office in order to generate the proper intention and emotional involvement. It has long been my privilege to speak at the Shabbaton held every year at the end of December in Crown Heights. I would usually arrive in New York on Thursday or Friday and leave the following Sunday. I always scheduled my return flight to allow me the opportunity to join the Lubavitcher Rebbe's minyan for mincha on Sunday afternoon. On one such occasion, many years ago, I had arranged to fly back to Montreal at 4:30 p.m. That Sunday morning, I began to worry about my return trip. I'm a very nervous traveler, and I generally insist on being at the airport way in advance of my flight. Why had I decided to leave so early? The Rebbe's minyan generally began at 3:15 and usually ended at 3:30. Allowing myself 15 minutes to return to where I was staying, I could leave for LaGuardia no earlier than 3:45. What if traffic was heavy? What if a tire went flat? What if a tree had fallen across the Interborough Parkway and it being Sunday, the road crews took their sweet time in removing it? I calmed myself with the thought that these possibilities were very unlikely, and that if I left at 3:45 sharp, I would probably make my flight to Canada. This was at a time before security was so tight, you could still walk up straight to the plane. I then embarked on my yearly nerve-wracking ritual of arranging for a ride to LaGuardia Airport. In those days, there was only one car service in Crown Heights, and it was run by Hasidim, a class of people for whom time means nothing. I walked into the storefront office and told them I wanted a car to take me to LaGuardia at 3:45. I emphasized several times that 3:45 does not mean 3:50 or even 3:46. I was not interested in approximations. The owner, in soothing tones, assured me of a car at precisely 3:45. They were professionals with considerable experience in this business, and there was absolutely nothing to worry about. I started to leave, but I remembered something as I got to the door. I turned to the boss and asked him whether he would care to know the address to which the car should be sent. Oh, yes, of course. Sorry. You see the sort of people I was dealing with. By 3 p.m., I was packed into the little synagogue in which the Rebbe prayed mincha. Every student attending one of the 2 local yeshivas, as well as numerous neighborhood residents and out-of-town guests, were competing for space in that small room. My bones ached and I couldn't breathe, but this did not trouble me. This was normal. What bothered me was the time, 3:15, 3:16, 3:17. At 3:20, the Rebbe came in and mincha began. I tried to concentrate on my prayer, reminding myself that I was in the same minyan as my holy Rebbe. However, my overwrought brain simply would not mind. It perversely dwelt on my imminent betrayal by the car service. In the course of my struggles with myself, I became aware of a soft sobbing sound. I had already raced through my prayer, and I was able to glance sideways at my neighbor. He was a tall, thin, bearded man, dressed in Hasidic garb. His eyes were closed and tears streamed down his cheeks. His face was intense with concentration. He prayed slowly and with obvious effort. In spite of myself, I was touched. I could not imagine what sort of terrible trouble lay behind that heartfelt prayer. Perhaps he had a sick child at home or some crushing financial burden. I assumed that he was an out-of-town visitor seeking the Rebbe's aid, and I could not help feeling guilty about my own silly preoccupations with the car service, the airport, etc. I mentally wished him the best and hoped that things would turn out well for him. Mincha completed, I raced back to my host's home, and by 3:42 I was waiting the promised car with fire in my eyes, certain that it would not show. At precisely 3:45, a noisy, rusty station wagon, belching blue exhaust, rolled up, and the driver waved me in. I couldn't believe it. I put my suitcase in the back and then climbed in next to the driver. My second shock came with the realization that the driver was none other than my heartbroken neighbor at Mincha. As we drove off, the driver hummed a jolly Hasidic melody and seemed quite happy. We began to talk. Cautiously, I asked him about his welfare, his health, the health of his family, and the state of his finances. Each question elicited a hearty, if somewhat perplexed, "Thank God." Moreover, his wife was soon due to give birth, and he was in a particularly excited and happy mood. Gradually, it began to dawn on me that the remarkable outpouring of the heart that I had witnessed earlier was this man's ordinary daily mincha. Okay. Cute.